be quiet.
Okay, we have to talk.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Administration and Finance Committee of June 6th. Today, we're going to just be calling the board meeting, the Administration and Finance Committee meeting to order. We have all trustees present. Trustee Mario Pascucci is still on his way. Trustee Paula has given her regrets, and Trustee Anisha Thomas is present as well. Okay, I think, and Trustee Herman, you have Trustee Herman Valoria here?
Through the chair, not at the moment.
Not at the moment either. Other than that, all the other trustees are present this evening, along with our two student trustees. I have Diaz Coley present, and Leroy's not present right now. We start off with our next item, which is A2, our opening prayer. Trustee Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you, in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Bless us as we gather today for this meeting. Guide our minds and hearts so that we will work for the good of our community and help all your people. Teach us to be generous in our outlook, courageous in the face of difficulty, and wise in our decisions. Father, we praise you forever and ever. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Spirit. Amen.
Thank you very much, Trustee Corbett. Next, we move on to item A3. We'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge that we are on sacred Indigenous territory and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for being stewards of this land. Moving on to item A4, which is the approval of the agenda. Could I get an approver for the agenda? Moved by Trustee Thomas. Any opposed? Seeing none. Sorry, all in favor. Could I get your hands up? Perfect, thank you. Any opposed? Seeing no opposed, we move on to the next item. Do we have any declarations of interest this evening? Seeing no declarations of interest, could I get a mover for the approval of the minutes of the Administration and Finance Committee meeting of May 2nd? Moved by Trustee Daryl D'Souza. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, we move on to our next item. We have no pastor's remarks this evening. We move on to awards and presentations. Our first presentation is for our item C1, Partnering for Safe School Travel, the Mississauga School Streets Pilot Project by Laura Zieglen. Trustee Corbett. All righty, we'd like to welcome Laura forward.
Great. Thanks very much, everyone, for having me here this evening. Trustee Corbett for inviting me. So my name is Laura Zieglen, and I am the Vision Zero program lead at the City of Mississauga, and I'm very excited for this opportunity to share with you all about this exciting pilot project that the City of Mississauga undertook last year with the support of the Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board. And without further ado, I will jump into this presentation. So the school journey is an often overlooked part of our day. It's often seen as something to rush through in between other important parts of our day. But the reality is, when we add up all the travel time across all the times that we make this journey, it makes up quite a significant part of our year. When we make this journey an active one by walking, riding our bikes, or even driving part way and walking the rest, there's many benefits for our children, from helping prepare their brains to learn, to helping with their growth and development, to improving their mental health. And these benefits also extend to the caregivers walking them to school as well. But the benefits also go beyond the individual. School communities where more families travel by active and sustainable modes and less families drive mean less time spent by school staff managing kiss and rides. Efforts to encourage active school travel can be counted as part of your eco-school certification. And importantly, when families have the opportunity to interact face-to-face instead of insulated within their individual vehicles, it creates a sense of connection amongst community members who might not otherwise ever get to meet. But what do the data say about how students in Peel Region get to school? According to statistics from StopR, 67%, or about 2/3 of students in the DPCDSB, live within walking distance of their school. However, survey data from the Transportation Tomorrow survey indicates that travel by car is actually the most prevalent travel mode for school trips, with less than half of those students living within walking distance, regularly walking to school. Two of the main reasons often given by caregivers when asked why they drive their children to school are convenience of driving and concerns about traffic dangers. In 2021, the city of Mississauga received a grant to pilot a concept called School Streets, which directly challenges our current status quo of prioritizing convenience for cars as part of the school drop-off and pickup, and instead prioritizes the needs of families traveling by active modes, such as walking, cycling, or traveling by wheelchair. The School Streets pilot project happened concurrently across 3 Ontario municipalities, with Mississauga being one of them. The funding was provided through the Ministry of Education and administered by Green Communities Canada through their Ontario Active School Travel Program. 880 cities provided resources and support to the 3 pilot communities, and at the end, they wrote a report of the results. And I've included the QR code link to that report on the final slide of this presentation, if you are so inclined to go read it in detail. Interestingly, in York Region, it was actually the York District School Board that led the project. It wasn't the municipality. So what exactly is a school street and how does it work? So in a nutshell, a school street creates a temporary car-free environment in front of schools during drop-off and/or pickup periods to prioritize safety for students and families traveling by active modes to school. It creates an environment where community members can linger in the space rather than rush. Vulnerable road users are not relegated to skinny sidewalks and don't have to worry about traffic dangers in front of the school. And it provides an opportunity to rethink our normal routines. Our team in Mississauga decided early on that we wanted to work with up to 3 sites to be able to compare and contrast results across locations to see, does this concept really work? But we didn't want to work with just any schools. So we went through a very detailed selection process involving data collected from Stop Bar and other partners and discussions with our project advisory group. In the end, we worked with 2 sites and 3 schools. The first location was Peel District School Board School, located in Ward 2 of Mississauga, and you can see the before and after shots there. The other 2 schools were located on the same street as each other, St. Alfred Catholic School and Brian W. Fleming Public School, just a couple hundred meters apart from each other on the same road. These 2 schools comprised our second location in Ward 3 of Mississauga in a very diverse neighborhood of newcomers and English language learners. And again, you can see the before and after of people kind of all squished onto the sidewalk and then being able to spread out and take their space across the road. Beginning in January of 2022, city staff coordinated local project planning teams for each site of the pilot, including local residents, parents and guardians of children at the school, school board trustees and superintendents, as well as local high school students. City staff worked with these teams to plan how the pilot would be implemented in those 2 school communities. We also worked with Stop Bar to ensure that our bus students could still safely get to school. Now, your school board was a key stakeholder in this project. Beyond just agreeing to have one of your schools participate in the pilot project, school board staff, students, and families played a key role in its success. Teachers and other school staff provided direction for the project through the project advisory committee that we set up in Ward 3, including suggestions like providing after-school snacks to help address food insecurity in that particular community. Teachers also led their classes to act as ambassadors for the project to do data collection, promote active transportation, and even plan activities for their peers in the space that was opened up on the street. Support staff and administrators connected us with high school student volunteers from the community as well, who gave their perspectives on how to make the project one that local parents would be comfortable with. They also helped plan and run activities within the closure space and contributed to communications and other community outreach about the project. At the end of the day, the city provided the funding and the overall coordination of the project, but the local flavor of each of the projects reflected the contributions of the school staff, students, and families who lived there. In addition to providing an opportunity for city staff and school board stakeholders to work together, the pilot also had some pretty impressive results as it relates to school travel itself. Across both sites, it was found that school streets were effective at increasing active school travel for school trips and decreasing driving for school trips. And I'll show you a few of the stats on the next slide. Based on surveys that were conducted in both communities, it was found that school streets were an effective way to increase awareness of active school travel as an option as well, as it disrupted normal routines and created an opportunity for reflection. And after the pilot was complete, public support for the idea increased to a majority being in support of the idea, compared to the other way around before people had a chance to see it in action. We also sought feedback directly from the students. They had lots of great things to say about getting to participate in this project, whether as activity planners or just getting to walk or bike on the street before and after school. At the schools where other students led activities, a lot of the feedback admittedly was about how much fun they had doing the activities. It wasn't all about the active transportation piece. But nevertheless, it was a great opportunity for students to get to experience something novel related to their travel environment and to reflect on their normal travel routines. Here's just a quick snapshot of some of our statistics. So you can see we've got the results across 2 of the different sites. The Ward 3 site, we saw 10% fewer cars around the school in the afternoon. At that site, we only closed the street in the afternoon at the request of the local community. At the Ward 2 site, we saw 38% fewer cars in the morning and 15% less in the afternoon. And this makes sense that the change in the morning would be more than the afternoon, because generally, and at both sites, we did see that there was higher rates of being driven to school in the morning, more time pressures, et cetera, in the morning compared to the afternoon. But impressively, at both of the sites, we saw a 41% increase in active transportation. And we measured that through doing counts in the community of people coming in, walking, riding their bikes, riding their scooters, any other active mode from all the different potential access points to the school. There were also some great outcomes around student engagement in this project. So we saw over 100 elementary school students engaged in planning and implementation of activities, 72 letters of recommendation written for students, and I should actually increase that because I just wrote a couple more letters today. 19 school travel focused initiatives for students, and over 1,000 volunteer hours for high school students. So high school students were really important contributors to making this project happen. An added bonus at the end of this project was that Mississauga's Traffic Safety Council donated an additional $500 to each of the schools after the pilot project had been completed, as a way to support efforts to continue to promote active transportation this year as well. The School Streets pilot has finished, but that doesn't mean that we're done working with our schools. Up to 8 schools per year are invited to participate in Mississauga's School Walking Routes program, an annual program that has been running since 2008. This program provides a celebratory launch event to celebrate students and families who walk or roll to school. It also provides educational activities led by city staff and our partners, resources for students walking, and signed routes, marking the routes for students who walk and alerting drivers to watch for students along those routes. It also includes a safety walkabout in the community with opportunities for staff, students, and caregivers to express their safety concerns to city staff as it relates to their child's route to school. And some of you here I know have been already out to some of these events in your ward, and I hope that you continue to be involved and take part in promoting active transportation at your schools. And sorry, my original version of this, I was like, could click through and you could see all of these. It's just static here. All right, so now it's time to consider the case for continuing school streets on a more long-term basis. We saw clear increases in active transportation and decreases in vehicular traffic during the pilot, as well as community building and relationship building between the city, school board, and local communities when more families had the opportunity to safely walk and roll to school. The questions I leave you with tonight are, how can we leverage the partnerships and momentum for this project moving forward? And what can the Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board do as a board to support active school travel moving forward? And that's it for me. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Laura, for that presentation. I'll have, if there's anyone online that'd like to ask some questions, I do see some hands. On the list so far, I have Trustee Corbett, I have Trustee Stefano Pascucci, I have Trustee Daryl D'Souza. If there's anyone else that would like to ask questions, just message me on the message box. First off, Trustee Bria Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, first, Laura, thanks so much for coming tonight and for presenting. I had the opportunity to hear Laura present to the City of Mississauga Council, and I found it was really informative. So hopefully trustees also felt the same. I appreciate the partnership that we have with the city and certainly with the schools to increase active transportation. So through the chair, I have a few questions. So the project was funded from the Ontario Active School Travel Grant. I imagine some of this information went and funding went towards physical hardware like the bikes and the bike racks that were installed. Are you able to share some of the other areas that the funding was used and how we would ensure this could be, continued for this project going forward?
Right, thank you. Through the chair, the majority of the funding, it was actually quite a small amount when you consider the amount of human resources that went into running this project. It was largely funded through kind of in-kind contributions from city staff, school board staff, and other partners in the community. The funding that we did receive largely went towards covering the salary of a co-op student who helped with some of the coordination, but also to covering some of the expenses for schools because we wanted to animate the streets and have activities in the streets. So we gave them funding that they could put towards materials that they could use for that hopefully they could keep then beyond the length of the pilot project. In the Ward 3 site, we put it towards the after school snacks because that was a request of that community. What else? Honoraria for volunteers. We wanted to recognize their time, their importance in making the pilot successful. And then some of it went to communications as well. For the bike racks, actually, so those are paid for through a program that exists through the region of Peel that's being phased out, unfortunately. So the city of Mississauga covered the rest of it through the school walking routes program, but that's something we'd like to look into in the future in terms of, you know, who can pay for bike racks. But the bikes that were donated actually came from community organizations that just heard about the pilot and were really excited about it and wanted to be able to contribute something. So I'd say probably the biggest barrier to making this a sustainable project over the long term, because we largely had funding with the resources we already had. We didn't really need a lot of extra funding to make it happen, but it was the sustainability of the volunteer model. We really required a large number of volunteers to run this day in and day out. And, you know, like Christina here, you know, other staff who work for the school boards were coming out to volunteer their time. Obviously, we can't expect people to be doing that regularly. So we need to look into the model of how we actually kind of supervise the street closure. If we do need to be chaperoning vehicles that are walking through, or if we can make other exceptions. The city of Mississauga was actually recently approached by green communities in 880 cities. So the people who funded this pilot have applied for additional funding for a national pilot to expand school streets, and that Mississauga would be sort of a level up community where we would try to do a couple of sites over an entire school year. So and the funding would be much greater that they would provide for that would allow us to hire some more staff to run it. But also part of that is that they're going to have a community of practice of other practitioners across the country who are doing school streets as well. So we could have those discussions about what a sustainable model might look like. Yeah, so to be determined.
Thank you so much. Through the chair, my next question was, it was indicated that the pilot was supported by the majority of community members, which is wonderful to have such positive engagement. Is there more that you can explain in terms of the feedback from the families of the school communities that were impacted and how they felt that experience was for them? If they initially weren't on board, they certainly did change their minds.
Sure. So through the chair, I guess there's a couple of pieces to that question that I'd like to address. So first of all, we did have a majority after the pilot was in place who said that they supported the pilot, but I wouldn't say it was a vast majority. I don't want to oversell it and say that everyone suddenly loved it afterwards, but people did come around. I'd say the main concerns that we saw, they kind of broke down into different types of concerns. Some were, I would call them ideological in nature, people who just in general don't agree with the idea of people walking in the street, that's a space for cars. But then some of them were more practical in nature, like, oh, it takes me longer now to get to school because instead of coming right up to the front, I need to either park further away or walk from home, and it takes a bit longer. And I'd say the greatest concerns were for families who have multiple children who maybe go to different schools. It added a level of complication to the drop-off and pickup experience, and I can appreciate that. But the other thing I wanted to add to that, well, first of all, there was some really positive feedback too. So for example, there was one family, we actually had given them an exemption that they could drive through the space because this father, his son had special needs and he was concerned about not being able to drive to the school. So he was chaperoned through the space, but a few days into the pilot, he actually started walking with his son. And he said it was really nice for his son to get to experience this and, you know, participate in this with the rest of the school community. And we also had other parents who just told us, you know, I always just drive because it's what I do. And now I've had the opportunity to park a little further away, walk in, I'm getting some exercise and it's really nice. So yeah, there was the people who came around. And some people maybe didn't say anything because they were walking already and just kind of got to enjoy that they had more space and didn't have to worry about the traffic. But the second part of my answer to the question is I want to acknowledge the short length of this pilot that we did. So it was just 3 weeks in each of the communities. Kingston, as another example, did a full year pilot project. They actually are just finishing up their second full year. And within their first 3 weeks, they said that was kind of when they had all of their complaints. People were adjusting. It was a change in the routine. It's difficult to rethink the routine. But after the first month or so, it started going a lot smoother. There was less and less complaints. And by the end of the year, they actually had the community requesting to keep it going into the following year. We haven't really had the chance to test that out in Mississauga. So I'm hoping that if we get to do this expanded pilot, that'll be an opportunity to test that out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did have one more question through you, but it was really around the sustainable model and what that looks like. And unless there was anything else you wanted to share, I know you did touch on that earlier.
Through the chair, I guess the only thing that I would add to that is that having worked in school travel planning for almost 7 years now, I've tried lots of different initiatives, helped schools with a lot of different types of initiatives, from engineering, like adding bike lanes, sidewalks, to educational campaigns and encouragement, like walk to school events. And I've never seen one that had such like an obvious and immediate change to active school travel and to decreasing the amount of cars coming to the site. And I should note too, when we say that there was less cars, obviously there was less cars in front of the school because this road was closed, but we were also measuring at spaces at all the sort of alternate points around the community where we anticipated that people would go instead. And even when accounting for that, the total number of cars did go down. But I would say this is something that I think is worth looking into in terms of a lot of the different priorities of not only the city, but the school board as well, because we know that it has the possibility to be quite impactful. So I'd say really just continued partnership between the city and the school boards is something that we need to keep working on if we want to be able to move towards a sustainable model. And I'll just mention that both the city and the school board are both part of the Peel Safe and Active Routes to School Committee, which is comprised of a number of different organizations across the region of Peel with a focus on active travel. So yeah, continuing to contribute to those discussions will be part of the overall picture as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I have Trustee Stefano Pascucci.
Thank you, and thank you, Laura, for the presentation. Just a couple of questions for you, if you don't mind. Through Mr. Chairman, how much of an advance notice did the general, public or the houses in the area get before these streets were shut down?
Through the chair, so the pilot launched in May,
Mhm.
And we sent out letters to all of the impacted households who are within the area that we were going to be closing down the street in January of last year. And then we had continued communications that went throughout until we sent out another notification about a month in advance. And we also had a community meeting that was open to members of the public. And that was after we'd had 3 meetings of a more kind of closed local project planning team of other members of the community who had expressed interest after they got that first notification from the city. We tried to give as much notice as possible so people had a chance to plan around it.
Yeah, and I guess a follow-up to that question: when were the streets closed? Then I guess was it by 7 a.m., 8 a.m.?
Through the chair, they were relatively short closures. So as I mentioned in Ward 3, we only closed the streets in the afternoon. So that was from feedback from the community, because I think the bell times between the Catholic and the public school were like 15 or 20 minutes apart, and it was just felt that that would be too long of a closure in the morning and too many impacts on families. So we just did the afternoon. That was a 70-minute closure that was about an hour before the first school's bell, and then went about 20 minutes after the second school's bell. If that math adds up. And that was, again, at the request of the community who wanted to have the use of that street closed space to do activities with the class. And the other site where they closed it in the morning as well, it was a 35-minute closure around the morning.
Yeah, because I can see that the most issues that you would have would be people complaining about the morning because they're trying to get to work and so on and so forth. And Obviously you have to work with the community. Last question, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay. Were there additional crossing guards added to I guess the routes around or outside of the closed streets?
So through the chair, no, we looked into doing that. We didn't actually close any locations that had crossing guards in them already, and we had looked into the potential impacts and felt that it wasn't necessary. I think in retrospect, I may have wanted to add another crossing guard at one of the sites, but it was, I think that's something we would look into for a future iteration of this project if we were to move forward with another one in the future.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much again for the presentation, and thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Stefano Piscucci. Next, Trustee Bruno Enick, is it to this point or is it a different?
No,
question?
it's a different point. If you have a speakers list, I can just put it on the list.
No problem. Next, I have Trustee Daryl D'Souza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you to Laura. Have you all looked into, my first question was basically how long was the streets closed? And I guess that was answered. But from a long-term perspective or from implementing this across more schools, did you all involve the Peel Police or the City Police by any chance to ensure that their vehicles were there when the roads were closed?
So through the chair, that was actually quite a contentious point of discussion that we had with our local project planning teams. We had some members of the community were very for the idea of police being involved in this project, and some that were quite adamantly against police being involved in the project. We ultimately decided at the end of the day, looking at it from an equity perspective, that we would not involve police in this project. They were willing to participate, and I think they wanted to be able to be part of this, but we made the decision not to do it. We didn't actually have any safety concerns regarding the drivers respecting the rules of the closure. We had volunteers positioned at all of the barriers where the roads were closed. And then we also had volunteers who were acting as, we called them chaperones, to walk any exempt vehicles, so people who lived within the space and anyone with special needs, that they could be walked through the space at a, or they could drive through at a walking speed, and we didn't have any safety concerns.
My next question through you, Mr. Chair, is that did we allow the special needs buses to go to the door of the school or?
Through the chair, yes. So that again, that was something that we discussed early on. The kind of ideal vision was that there would be 0 vehicles in the space, and it would just be completely pedestrian and active transportation space. But it was decided that that was too restrictive. So again, the chaperones walked the special education buses through the space. Actually, and they didn't need to do it in the Ward 3 site because of the way that the road closure was structured. We were able to just open the barriers, and it was right at the edge of the school driveways anyway, so we just let the buses go right in.
Yeah, and through you, Mr. Chair, just last question, or do you want me to go back to the bottom of the list?
Don't worry, you can just go with that one more question.
Thank you. Last question was just skip my mind. Oh, you can just put me to the back of the list and
Sure, no problem.
Thank you.
Trustee, Bruno Enick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. I kind of smirked when you said it was a relationship, working relationship between the city and the board, which I agree 100% wholeheartedly. But the buy-on has to come from the parents and the community. When you determine a specific area, I have one in mind, to be quite honest with you, that I have seen people leave their cars in the middle of the driveway, go and get their child, door open, car running. I have seen and I have heard parents be totally disrespectful to the young children that are around by the language and things that they demonstrated with their hands. How do you change that culture, which I know is an impossible question, so I apologize for it, but I'm sure you must have come across scenarios of that nature during your career. And how do you work with community that yells and screams at the trustee, "You can't tell me what I need to do with my child"? So I'm kind of looking for some guidance on that.
Right, so through the chair, that is $1 million question, and I think I'd be very wealthy if I
I'll take
knew
the
the
million.
silver bullet answer to that question. I mean, a lot of where this stems from is the frustration of the congestion and the chaos, right? So I mean, one thing I can offer is that what we are proposing is breaking that up. It's spreading the traffic to different areas. We measured the traffic in different areas to, see, are we just creating congestion in a different spot instead? And for the most part, we did not find that was the case. It's very important. Site selection is a very important part of this in terms of the network of the streets, but also in terms of a school that would be a good fit. So I mentioned that we were pretty specific with our selection criteria. So as a starting point, any school that we would want to try this at needs to have a majority of students living within the specified walking distance of the school, because it's going to fail if 50–60% of people live out of the catchment area. Your people need to drive if they live really far away. So that was one of the most important criteria. The type of street, so we can't close down like a collector or a major collector or arterial road for this project. It needs to be a quieter road so we're not causing too much disruption to other through traffic that uses the street. But yeah, in terms of the anger with parents, I don't have an answer for you for that. It's really trying to come at it from all different approaches. Part of it is the education and encouragement around active transportation. Part of it is engineering the environment so that it makes it more inviting for active transportation, but also smoother for people who are driving. All these different pieces are part of the puzzle. Enforcement can be part of it, though it's not the solution, because as soon as you remove the enforcement, behaviors tend to return if you haven't dealt with the root cause of the frustration and the bad behaviors in the first place. And evaluation too, making sure that we're studying what are the reasons why people are traveling the way they are or exhibiting the behaviors they are, to try to come up with solutions to those specific issues, because it's not the same at every school and across every community. So the congestion generally is a common occurrence.
Yeah, as you were talking, and I was just picturing the area concern for myself. I mean, there's not only our staff, but you have 11 trustees that are extremely concerned about the health and safety of the kids, first and foremost, and staff that receive those vehicles. And the school that I'm thinking of, there are cars that go into side streets and they park in the driveway and think nothing of it. People come out and say, "You got to move." Well, I'm just going to drop off my kid and I got to get to work, and that attitude doesn't stem well for good neighborhood, right? For good neighbors. And I'm wondering, I don't think, because one of the roads is actually a major artery, not like the 401, but I'll call it, if you're familiar with it, I'll call it Queensway. And so I'm a little bit concerned of where cars would be, and it would probably be on the other side. And now it becomes a congestion on that side of the road. And parents don't want to walk. And it's simple. I told you that I got yelled and screamed at and told I have no right as to what they should or shouldn't do with their child. And all I did was, you live right there. Like, you're complaining about the time frame. And so I think that the challenge that city and the board have. Once you've identified an area is getting that buy-on by third and probably the most important portion, which is the parents. You know, the community can always get, okay, we understand that, but any suggestions on that, or is it just let's try it and let's see?
So through the chair, again, like I don't have a silver bullet solution for you, but one thing that was really effective for us with the School Streets pilot project, because it was something so new, and we needed to get buy-in, not just from the communities, but even before going forward, we need to get buy-in from, you know, my upper management at the city, with the city councilors, trustees, right? We needed people to buy into the idea too, was that we promised we would do lots of community engagement and not just the style of going out and telling them what was happening, but also like meaningfully including them in the conversations around what we were hoping to do and giving them some agency as well. I think the approach to how you bring something forward plays a big role in how people respond to it as well. Of course, they're like, no matter what, there are going to be people who will not like something that's different than what they're used to, but it's about respecting the community about the way that you approach it and not kind of coming in and saying, well, we know what's best for you and we're going to fix things for you. It's about involving them in the conversation as respectfully as we can.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, Mr. Chairman, if I could, one more question, just with regards to next steps. Like, you have a plan for another school of this board that you would like to work with or have conversation with the trustee, with staff, the superintendent, the school, parents, go out to council and talk about it? Is there a plan, a step, or?
Yeah, so through the chair, we're still at a point of trying to determine what might be a more sustainable model for this, that we don't require so many volunteers to run it, because it made it really challenging. It was fine for the 3 weeks at each site that we were doing, but it's not sustainable to try to do that as a long-term program. So we're in conversations around what that could look like. We would probably go back to our same framework in terms of how we would select schools that we think it could potentially work at. This is not an initiative that would work at every school, as I mentioned. It needs to be the right street layout, the right makeup of demographics in terms of how children have the option of traveling to school. And then also supportive administration at the school who stands behind it and wants to do something about it and is on board with the approach. Without those pieces in place, we can't do it. But if you do have specific schools in mind, maybe as sort of a interim step, we could involve them in the school walking routes program. That is something that's running already, does not involve a street closure, but looks at other aspects, some of those other ones I was mentioning around how we promote active school travel. And then when we're at a point to look into expanding this particular pilot, then at least that school, if they seem like they might be a good fit, then we kind of have them like that.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And thank you to the presenter.
Thank you very much, Trustee Naka. Trustee Gerald D'Souza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question was, has the city looked into, if you want to grow this project and make it sustainable, has the city looked into realigning the crossing guards to be part of this project? Because if the crossing guards are actively involved, and they're quite a number, I believe, over 100 crossing guards, then they could be the ones spearheading these a project similar to this, wherein they just put the signs across roads and add some more crossing guards, and that would be a sustainable model.
So through the chair, are you proposing that we would use our existing crossing guards, or that we would hire more crossing guards to do a similar job as the volunteers did in the pilot?
See, because most crossing guards are placed within a 75 to 100 meter radius of the school. And I believe these roads that were closed would be around that radius, not 2 or 3 kilometers away from the school. So you're not blocking extensive roads for this program.
So through the
So
chair, that is a potential model we're looking into, not specifically the crossing guards themselves, but if we did get funding to expand this project, that we might potentially look into hiring part-time staff in sort of a similar type shift as a crossing guard, because the hours are very similar to a crossing guard's hours, but they would serve a different purpose. So that's is a potential avenue that we're looking into.
because if you could just explain as to how the Kingston school has implemented this model for a full academic year, and they're going into year 2 now. So have they used crossing guards or?
No, so Kingston, they ran theirs in partnership with Queen's University. So a number of their volunteers
Oh,
are actually
Queens, okay.
university students. And then they also have residents, I think mostly retired residents who live on the
Correct.
street, who volunteered their time. And that was who some of our volunteers were for this pilot project. But we wouldn't want to rely on that because it's possible that there might not be anyone on the street who steps forward. And we did have some college students as well.
Kingston and Queens wouldn't be a great example because most of those roads are not very frequented by traffic. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Trustee Gerald D'Souza. Are there any other questions? Seeing no other questions, thank you very much, Laura, for that presentation, and we appreciate you coming down today.
Thank you.
Next item, we move on to item D, which is delegations. We have no delegations this evening. We move on to item E, updates, information reports from trustees for receipt. Starting with item 1, regular reports, the Ontario Catholic School Trustees Association report. Trustee Del Rosario.
We do not have a report for tonight, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Next, we move on to item E1B, which is good news items. Anybody have any good news items? Seeing none, we move on to, we have no items for item F. We move on to item G, which is updates, information, reports from administration for receipt, starting with G1, health and safety update for the 2021-2022 school year. Superintendent Stephanie Strong.
Chair, I'm pleased to bring forward this evening's report for the annual Health and Safety Department period of September 2021 to August of 2022. I'm joined this evening with Ms. Jessica Fearing. She is the manager of the Health and Safety Department. The report contains a brief synopsis of the major areas of responsibility for the Health and Safety Department. At the time this report was drafted, the terms of reference for the Multi-Workplace Joint Health and Safety Committee was under review. I'm pleased to share with trustees that the Ministry of Labor, Immigration, Training and Skills Development Regional Program Coordinator has approved the revised terms of reference. This provides continuation for the terms under the multi-workplace structure for another 5 years. The current structure will remain in place until May 31st of 2028. Under workplace safety inspections, which are required under OSHA, we currently inspect approximately 166 sites per month. These are mostly done manually in paper form. One of the major initiatives of this department is to move to an electronic cloud-based facility management software program called eBase. This will allow us to better record, track, and analyze the results in real time of our workplace inspection. They are piloting this project currently and expect to implement it next school year. With our accident and incident reporting, the Health and Safety Department manages this under a software program called Park Lane. The Health and Safety Department received just over 1,500 incident reports during the 2021-2022 school year. These reports can be summarized on Appendix A of Trustees' reports, which can be found on pages 35 to 37 of your package. I would like to draw your attention to the top 3 types of incidents that are reported. Number 1 incident is violence, followed by struck or contacted by, and then slips, trips, and falls. Using this same data, we do a comparative analysis over which of these incidents resulted in a lost time. you will see that our number one accident that results in staff actually losing time from work is slips, trips, and falls, followed by violence and struck by or contact. Although this is not contained within the report, we typically do a 2-year analysis for trustees to review the data against previous years. Given that the last 3 years don't have good comparative value, I would like to tell trustees what the incident report number was for 2017, 2018. It was 2,612. In the 2018, 2019 year, it was 1,378. This is one of the first years that we will have a full, complete year of data, as we are finally fully back in school without any work stoppages or disruptions due to COVID. And I'm happy to answer any questions the trustees may have.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Strong. Do I have any questions? Just Trustee Stefano Pascucci.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, do we, obviously we collected data for when when these incidences happen. So like specifically the slips, trips and falls. Do we see that there is an increase of, I guess, incidences over the winter months on where the contractors are doing the work versus where our staff are taking care of it?
So through the chair, we have actually 2 areas where that may be captured. One of them might be under the risk management insurance. If you are talking about incidents and accidents of third party, if you are talking about our staff, then this would be the data.
Yeah, and the reason why I ask is because after snowfall, obviously, and I asked the question earlier, how far back do these contractors go? And if for whatever reason they have a heavy snowfall and they haven't gotten to a school, then obviously we would have more of an incident when people are walking to school in the morning. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Trustee Stefano Pascucci. Do we have any other questions? Trustee Luz Del Rosario.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to find out where we have the top 3 incident types. Can you just give us an idea? We have a 56% increase in violence. Could you just give us an idea what comprise of violence that happens? Is this between staff or staff student, and what kind have we experienced?
So through the chair, the 56% that you see here is not representative of an increase. It's that 56% of the incidents that were reported were categorized as violence. When an incident is classified as violence, and I'll give you one example, if we have a student who has an episode or is having some regulation issues, and that would constitute one incident of violence. However, if 5 staff members were involved or in the room, that incident would be reported 5 times.
Mhm.
Each of the staff members would then file an incident report.
Mhm.
So it's
Okay.
a little difficult to actually give you an exact number of how many violent incidents occurred, which is why we compare it against lost time. And when we compare it against lost time, we see that it falls to our second.
Yeah. It is still high though. If you compare it to last time, which means some of the violence that happens affected our staff that made them lose time of work, right?
Through the chair, yes, and I can tell you that the lost time for violence in the 2021-2022 school year was 53.
Yeah. Now, thank you for that information. Mr. Chair, could I just follow up with another question?
Sure.
Same thing with the struck or contact by. We have it as our number 2, and then it becomes number 3 in terms of lost time. Can you give me an idea of what would have been a struck or contact? Is it a bad contact or struck by another person, a third party, a student?
Through the chair, we most often see this categorized in phys ed classes and in doing yard duty and supervision. Frequently, they're hit in the head by an soccer ball, or a student has in fact thrown something, and that would be struck
Mhm.
by our contact.
Okay, all right. Thank you for the clarification, Stephanie. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Trustee Del Rosario. Do we have any other questions? Seeing no questions, thank you very much for that presentation. Next, we move on to item G2, which is risk management and insurance update for the 2021-2022 school year. Superintendent Stephanie Strong.
Thank you. Through the chair, this evening, I am pleased to bring forward the annual update of the risk management insurance, which falls under the Department of Health and Safety for the period of September 2021 to August 2022. The risk management and an insurance division covers all areas of insurance, including property, liability, automotive, and cyber. They currently are our primary liaison with the Ontario School Board Insurance Exchange, and they provide support to our school administrators on a range of school activities that would determine level of risk. So, for example, field trips and school excursions. In January of 2022, OSBI implemented a new program focusing on security hygiene and cyber insurance. They implemented a questionnaire to develop an insurance level score on each school board's level of cybersecurity. Dufferin Peel received an overall score of 60.6, which will serve as our baseline to monitor improvements and progress going forward. It also qualifies Dufferin Peel for the standard coverage, which is a level of coverage that was purchased by the board. The Human Element Loss Prevention Program that trustees are familiar with as HELP, Dufferin Peel was awarded a rebate of just over $76,000. That money is then reinvested towards a risk management loss control initiative. Cybersecurity has been ranked as one of the highest risk factors in the insurance industry, and this rebate was put towards enhancing a new cybersecurity program. As OSBI is no longer supporting the HELP program, it will be replaced by a new loss control program that we are currently waiting information on. The incident and accident reporting that is covered under this department is student and third-party accident reporting, and they are tracked by OSBI. We did have an increase in reports this year. Again, the comparative data was when the schools weren't open for the full year. These incidents are summarized for you on Appendix A, which is found on pages 40 to 42 of your package, and I'm happy to answer any questions the trustees may have.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Strong. Do we have any questions to this presentation? Seeing no questions, we move on to the next item. Next item is G3, Student Transportation Update and Service Delivery. Superintendent Matthew Thomas.
Good evening, and through the chair, this evening I am pleased to present the update on student transportation service delivery. And as always, this report includes information on the service delivery provided by the Student Transportation Appeal Region, STOPAR, as well as the Service de Transport Wellington Dufferin Student Transportation Services, STWESTS, on behalf of our Dufferin Peel students. The report begins on page 43 of your agenda package. First of all, I would just note with respect to driver status, as was reported in a previous update, we were experiencing challenges with spare driver coverage, particularly in 2 of our school bus divisions. STOPAR staff have had conversations since that time to work out some solutions with those operators, and they're pleased to report that the action plan that the bus operators have provided since that time has been quite satisfactory, and that the operators were able to exert some additional influence in terms of getting some more plans in place for recruitment, driver recruitment, training, and retention. It is an ongoing challenge, I will note. However, as we have been able to manage throughout the course of this school year, STOPR is in relatively very good shape with respect to driver retention relative to transportation consortia right across the province. With respect to our Wellington-Dufferin Consortium, there have been some more challenges with finding bus operators, or at least retaining bus operators to service all routes. In part, it's a result of the challenge that many industries are having across various sectors to hire and retain staff. However, the Wellington-Dufferin Consortium again has been able to make some progress in terms of conversations that they've had with their operators to promote increased efforts towards retention, training, and recruitment as well. They have, in fact, also been able to address some of their shortfalls through consolidation of routes. At the bottom of page 43 is a reminder about the annual first-time rider program. I know that I've provided trustees with that update previously, but just to highlight that the first-time rider program from STOPR will be offered at 8 school locations across Peel Region on Saturday, August 26th. The sessions are approximately 30 to 45 minutes each and operate between the hours of 9 a.m. and 12 noon on that day. Information has also been shared about this through all of our school newsletters via STOPR's Spring Summer newsletter. Parents and guardians will be able to book a time slot for the session on the STOPR website, stopr.ca, starting June 21st. I'll just make a quick note that the first-time rider programs are also being offered for Dufferin County schools on Tuesday, August the 29th. And information can be found on the stwdsts.ca website. On page 44, there's information about ongoing school bus safety training that's provided through funding from the Ministry of Education. It's offered by a third-party provider for all elementary students. It's split between our primary age students, JK to grade 3, as well as our junior and intermediate students in grades 4 to 8. For the 23-24 school year upcoming, there are 64 schools that have been identified to receive training, and a communication has been sent to these schools in April to provide information about the program and to allow for the provider to reach out directly to each school to book sessions. The Chipmunk school bus tracking application, which we provided information to trustees previously on, the pilot project for that app continues. We're now up to approximately 20 Dufferin Peel schools that are participating in the pilot. STOPR continues to monitor the number of daily users and is working with the developer to resolve issues. STOPR will be providing a further report on the results of the pilot in fall of 2023, with the hope to be able to launch the Chipmunk app more fully during the 2023-2024 school year. And then finally on page 44, information, and it continues on to pages 45 and 46 and 47, information about school bus delays for the months of April and most of May 2023. And information is provided in the form of graphs and charts highlighting the schools with the highest delays or the most frequent numbers of delays. And with that, I would be pleased to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Matthew Thomas. If I have any questions, could I get everyone to please message in the chat box? First off, Trustee Bruno Inica.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just with regards to the date, I read it and I heard it right. I thought I heard it right. Why would Caledon Dufferin have their date on the 29th on a Tuesday?
Through the chair, I don't have an answer myself. That's the information we were given. I can certainly take that back and follow up with them.
I mean, most people, make arrangements for their children in the summertime, unless, of course, you have a job that you're home. But on a Tuesday, in the middle of, beginning of the week, it doesn't make sense to me. If we want parents to come out and bring their children, I don't think Tuesday's the best day. It's just an observation from a parent perspective. When other parents get to go on a Saturday, I have to go on a Tuesday.
Through the chair, I think there are a couple of things I would just note to that. One is that the training in Dufferin also includes Wellington County. So I think a decision was made to also take into account schools in Wellington County, which is the majority of the catchment area that particular student transportation consortium serves. And also it's the first, I believe it's the first attempt at reviving this since the pandemic. So I can certainly take the question back in terms of why they picked Tuesday and not a weekend. But
if there was some consultation and parents said, yeah, Tuesday works, then Tuesday works. But it wouldn't work for me. I'll be very honest with you. So if staff could take that back to figure out why on a Tuesday versus a Saturday, when everybody, or most people, not everybody, because some people do work on Saturday as well, but the likelihood of guardians, both guardians working on Saturday at the same time, I would guess, and I would be guessing, is slim and none. The other is, I know that I heard staff indicate that, and it says in the report, that it would go out in the Stop Bar newsletter and through the school. Is it possible to have the school messenger send out a message to all September JK parents, current JK, current SK, and current grade 1 and 2 parents to advertise? I know in the past when I did attend, because I did attend these in the past, a lot of parents did not know of the date. One of the things, as soon as I heard the date, when it was, every council that I would go to, or every journey into learning presentation that schools had, I would talk about it. I would say, regardless if you live down the street, at one point in your child's life, they will take a bus. And so educating them on how the health and safety of it all would be beneficial. So is that something that could be done without a significant amount of work? Because I think that it would go a long way to invite them. I won't say personally, but it is to some degree a personal email saying, hey, by the way, at one point, whether your child does walk or not, at one point your child will, and I believe it was Superintendent Matthews yourself that said at one point, everybody rides a bus. So if that's possible, it would be most graciously appreciated.
through the chair, we will make that happen.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you again to staff.
Thank you very much, Trustee Bruno and Nika. Do we have any other questions? Seeing no questions, thank you very much, Superintendent Matthew Thomas. Next, we move on to item G4, which is the March 31st, 2023 enrollment report. Superintendent Matthew Thomas.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm going to invite Manager of Planning Stephanie Cox to provide the report, present the report. Apologize.
Thank you and good evening. All right, can everybody hear me now? Thank you, good evening. Through the chair, the report that you have before you is the annual information report prepared by the Planning Department, which outlines the board's enrollment as of the March 31st Ministry of Education reporting date for the 2022-2023 school year. As noted in the report, schools reported a total of 72,347 students. 42 of those, 42,603 were elementary students and 29,597 secondary students. This is a decrease of 990 elementary students and 234 secondary students from March 31st, 2022. Appendix 1 is the enrollment report, which breaks down the enrollments by school at both the elementary and secondary panels, and the difference in enrollment for each between March 31st, 2022 and March 31st, 2023. You will note that all remote secondary students have been transferred to St. Paul, which is the designated remote learning location. Remote elementary students remain affiliated with their home school and are counted as part of their home school enrollment. The exception to this is elementary students in grades 5 through 8 with an IEP. These students have been transferred to Father Clare Tipping. There are currently no specialty programs with remote students. And this concludes my presentation of the report, and I'm happy to take any questions trustees may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manager Stephanie Cox. Any questions towards this presentation? Seeing no questions, thank you very much for the presentation. Next, we are moving on to item G5, which is our 2024 Education Development Charge Bylaw Review. Superintendent Manager Stephanie Cox.
Thank you, and through the chair. In May of 2019, the Board of Trustees passed the 2019 Education Development Charges Bylaw for the Region of Peel, which came into effect on July 1st of that same year. The current EDC bylaw is set to expire on June 30th, 2024. It is in the best interest of the board to pass a new bylaw prior to the expiration of the current bylaw. Education development charges are collected on all new development within the Region of Peel and fund the purchase of land on which schools will be constructed. In order to qualify for education development charges, the board's estimated average elementary or secondary school enrollments over the 5 years after the new bylaw will come into effect must be greater than the total capacity of the board on the day the bylaw is passed. Alternatively, the board could also qualify for education development charges if the board can demonstrate there are insufficient funds in its education development charge account to pay for outstanding financial commitments related to land costs. In order to pass a new EDC bylaw, the board must prepare a background study in accordance with Ontario Regulation 2098 of the Education Act. The Peel District School Board has advised that it will be undertaking a review of its EDC bylaw, which is also set to expire on June 30th, 2024. As per past practice, Dufferin Peel and Peel District will work collaboratively to procure a consultant to facilitate the study process and an appraiser to assess the land values of the proposed school sites required to accommodate growth for each board. If it is determined through the study process that one of the boards does not qualify for future EDCs, this will not preclude the other board from moving forward with the process. Dufferin Peel will also request that the consultant review the potential of an education development charge bylaw for Dufferin County through the review of growth-related needs for school sites. Staff will report back to trustees on the findings of the background study. This concludes the presentation of the report. And once again, I'm happy to take any questions that trustees may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Manager Stephanie Cox. Do we have any questions?
Question, Master.
I have Trustee Mario Pascucci. If there's anyone else, feel free to message me or let me know. Trustee Mario Pascucci.
Thanks, my friend. Question to you, to staff. Recognize the new bill that's be talking about the reorganization of Peel, it's called. How will that affect the bylaw and that's being the bylaw recommendations being presented tonight?
Through the chair, we have engaged legal counsel and we've asked that question, but unfortunately, because the information regarding the separation of the Region of Peel or separation of Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon, we don't actually have that information as of yet. We will work with the consultant and legal to determine if there will be any implications.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, if I may, thank you for that response. A question I have to ask is regarding the consultant. Who's paying for them and whose consultant are they? Ours, theirs, or who?
Through the chair, the consultants are actually paid through the education development charge account. So it wouldn't actually be paid through the board. The fees are paid, they would be split between us and the Peel District School Board.
Okay. On what basis? Ratio, 50-50, 20-30, how do we base this?
Through the chair, I'd have to go back to my notes to see how we've done it in the past, but we would mirror what we've done in the past.
Can you come back to us of how you did it in the past, not, if you don't mind? And
Certainly.
I rather it did not go on blue for the simple reason is that this is a public document that should be, people should know of what's happening relative to the costs within Dufferin Peel to provide this particular service through what kind of funding, where's the funding come from and all that stuff. Is that possible to bring that back to us next meeting or next ANF or board?
Through the chair, if we can just put it through issues and events.
Why?
Through the chair, if I may just add on to that, this report is really just kind of an introductory to what will be coming forward to trustees, and that's going to be an EDC bylaw review. As we get closer to the date to initiate the review, you'll see a lot more reports discussing the more finer details about how funding is split up, how the charges are calculated, who pays for the charge, how much is paid for the charge, who the consultant is. So
That's going to be on blue?
sorry.
Is that going to be in blue? On blue paper? Is that information public?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That information is always public. It's contained within the background study right now. We just don't have the background study with us.
Okay, fair enough. Last question, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
How close are we working with the other two major areas relative to the reorganization of Peel? And the reason I'm bringing this within this context, because this will affect the entire, we're basically approving something that's going down a dark hole right now. That's the concern I have. I want to make sure we have enough flexibility, what have you. So how much consultation are we having with Peel and Caledon?
Through the chair, I'll just note a couple of things. First, as Manager Cox indicated in her comments earlier, the announcement by the provincial government about the dissolution of the region of Peel is still fairly recent. If you were to even ask staff at the region of Peel or the individual municipalities that comprise the region about what some of those specific impacts would be, they would likely also say that they are still trying to obtain more information. There is a detailed process that the provincial government outlined, which will take about 18 months to sort of unpack how the individual municipalities will operate once the region of Peel is dissolved formally. So there's still a lot of work ahead on that particular front. And at this point, Trustee Piscucci, we really don't have a whole lot of additional
I expect it.
So
I recognize and respect that. Sorry.
I was just going to add that as soon as we get more information, absolutely, we will try to convey that that information as well to trustees.
And when you get information about who are the participants within the committee or whatever they want to call their committee, the reorganizational committee of Peel Region, whatever, can we get the names when they come available to us?
Through the chair, as soon as we do receive that kind of information, we would be happy to do so.
Okay. Do you have a mover on this, Mr. Chairman?
We don't need a mover. It's just for.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, staff. I appreciate it. Thank you, trustees.
Thank you very much, Trustee Mario Piscucci. Do we have any other questions to this report? Seeing no questions, thank you very much for that presentation. Next, we're moving on to item G6, which is the interim financial report, 8 months ending April 30th, 2023. Ryan Hester.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to bring you the second interim financial report for the fiscal year 2022-23. And this covers the 8-month period from September 1st, 2022 to April 30th, 2023. The report begins on page 70 of the package. The report is in a consistent format with our prior period reporting, and the report is there before you, but I'd like to highlight a key few areas as we usually do. First, in terms of financial highlights, as a reminder, the budget amounts remain the same as what was submitted as part of our revised estimates in December of 2022. At that point, we forecasted a deficit of $55.7 million for the fiscal year. Again, that was primarily due to the ongoing LTD expenditures. The target for this expenditure report period is 66.7% spend. Our actuals are currently being reported at 62.8%. We do continue to see some spending ahead of target. So for example, on the detailed reports, you'll see the textbooks and supplies line, as well as our school office lines are slightly ahead of what you would expect for the targets for this time of year. These amounts support our classroom resources and the administration cost of the schools. But this is expected because we've been messaging to the schools similar to the prior year that they must buy their resources and the items they need if they hope to get them before the end of the year. So they're not disappointed. And that, of course, is due to the impact of the ongoing global supply chain challenges that we're experiencing. In terms of enrollment and staffing, there have been no changes since the prior report. However, you'll hear a little more this evening about some of the enrollment projections for the 2023-24 upcoming budget. So we'll leave some of those details till a little bit later on. Again, though, just to note, we are still experiencing a decline, as we just heard about the in-year decline. We'll be forecasting a future ongoing decline for enrollment into next year. And of course, that directly impacts the funding of our grants for student needs. In conclusion, the report presents our results for the first 8 months of the fiscal year. While most expenditures appear to be in line with our budget monitoring expectations, we'll continue to monitor all of our expenses and watch for trends as we move towards our year-end fiscal ending August 31st, 2023. Mr. Chair, at this point, I'd be pleased to answer any questions of the board.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Brian Hester. Do we have any questions? Seeing no questions, thank you very much for that presentation. Next, we're moving on to item G7, which is a report on public budget consultations. Executive Superintendent Julie Pacheco.
Thank you and good evening. Through the chair, the report starts on page 74 of your agenda. And Appendix B to this report was included in the TOPE package you received this evening. As part of the budget development process, a key component is public consultation and sharing of information. Some of the opportunities offered to our stakeholders for public consultation and input included an ability to delegate at committee and board meetings, email submissions through the Community Relations Department, attending the public budget consultation webcast, direct input through local area trustees, and a presentation evening with the Special Education Advisory Committee. There were no delegations received and no input from emails. On April 26th, Financial Services hosted a live public budget consultation webcast for sharing information and addressing questions from stakeholders. A copy of the questions and comments submitted that evening have been attached to this report, as well as staff responses. On April 12th, Financial Services presented budget information to Special Education Advisory Committee. Following the meeting, SEAC members provided an input and budget priorities document that was distributed earlier this evening as part of the TOPE package. In summary, it was important to share financial information and the status of Dufferin-Peel Catholic District School Board operating under a multi-year financial recovery plan with our stakeholders, and address questions and comments submitted. The information will be used to make informed decisions throughout the months ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Executive Superintendent Julie Pacheco. Do we have any questions? All right, seeing no questions, we move on to our next item.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question? I'm sorry.
Sorry, Trustee Mario Pascucci.
Yes, one question, may I?
Yep, Trustee Mario Pascucci.
To staff, Julie, one question I have to ask. Recognizing that we have a very aggressive budgets and what have you in terms of how we present them and making them be understood, was there any input from community in any way, shape, or form, or through principal, through trustees, whatever, in terms of how the budget could be presented in a different way for next year? Or are you quite happy with the results of what we have now, and we can continue presenting it to the community as in the way it has been presented?
So through the chair, what we've noticed actually, if we're addressing public consultation and input from stakeholders and sharing information, that having the live public webcast actually achieves better results in attendance and getting input from the community. holding an opportunity to attend a meeting in person just doesn't seem to work for the community and our staff. So continuing with the webcast seems to be the best opportunity for getting input to our process.
Okay, and one more question, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
The current presentation, we're done, if in the past, and I think it's the same now, the presentation is done to the community through room 101 or whatever room we're in, and we present the information. Am I correct?
Through the chair, that's a base for holding the live webcast, but what we do is encourage our school councils to get together, hold the webcast on the evening of a Catholic School Council meeting so that it can be live streamed in the school and a group of community members can watch at the same time.
Can we use it possibly, I'd like to look into the idea of a town hall opportunity, excuse me, where in fact we will present, but we have to present at the boardroom table with staff presenting from the boardroom table, and invite anybody that wishes to come to our board meeting or our board office to do their presentation if they want to do presentation. Can we look at that for next year?
So through the chair, we can bring that option to the trustees when we come forward with the budget development process report. As I mentioned earlier, in the past when we've had those town hall meetings and presentations centrally at the board office, we've had very minimal attendance. We seem to achieve greater attendance having the live webcast, but we can definitely bring it forward in the report when it comes forward for next year.
This would be one element of presenting, not just exclusively that. I mean, the idea is that the opportunity for parents to choose many opportunities, many chances to listen to the budget. Not just that, but I'm just saying, yes, continue with the school council involvement and what have you. Yes, continue doing that. But thank you very much, Julie. Yes, I'd like to see you put that into a consideration, and then we can go from there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Mario Piscucci. Any other questions? Seeing no questions, thank you very much, Executive Superintendent Cheripaca, for that presentation. We move on to our next item, which is item G8, the 2023-2024 budget update, GSN revenue summary. Executive Superintendent Julie Cheripaca.
Thank you. I would like to provide just some context for this report this evening. In previous years, Financial Services has brought forward one final proposed budget presentation. It would come before the Board of Trustees, and it contained a lot of information related to both the revenues and the expenditures and the total budget presentation at one time. In an effort to provide some greater detail, we've introduced a phased approach. So this evening, information is being presented on the grant revenues for 2023-24. There is no expenditure detail in this report. It's strictly the grants for student needs calculations, the change in any of the grants and the impact of enrollment on those grants. At the upcoming regular June board meeting, the proposed budget presentation will come forward. So that is that one package you normally would have seen. And it will include all of the information you received this evening on grant detail and the expenditure side of the equation. So the opportunity tonight is just to give you some of the grant information ahead of that night and offer an opportunity for you to see the detail and have that process, and then the full package will come at the board meeting. We do know that the proposed budget position will be a deficit. That, of course, based on our current LTD issue and our status of operating under a multi-year financial recovery plan. But all that aside, tonight's report is a focus on the GSN grant details. I draw your attention to page 83 of your agenda. Enrollment is a key driver in grant calculations. You received an enrollment report earlier this evening that showed year-over-year enrollment decline. The chart on this page draws attention to projected enrollment for 2023-24. The chart at the top outlines that we are facing a projected decline of 1.3% in enrollment, both at the elementary and the secondary panel level. And find my chart. The second chart on that page shows you some trend analysis with the decline we've had in our enrollment over the last 8 years. You can see we do have an ongoing enrollment decline, but the pace of that decline is starting to slow down. And the chart at the bottom is new, but highly impactful and very much important to the whole discussion. This shows our enrollment compared to school capacity, so our school utilization. The first two bars show elementary enrollment and elementary capacity. You can actually see the decline, and that shows underutilized space in our schools. The second two bars show secondary enrollment and secondary capacity. There is still a gap. It has grown, but not to the same extent as the elementary gap in school utilization. If you turn to page 82, a list of all the GSN grants are shown with the proposed calculation for 2023, 2024. The estimates are in the first number column you see next to the category of grant. The third column shows the increase or decrease over the current revised estimates for this 22-23 year. Most of the increases you would see are reflective of labor provisions included in the GSN by the ministry for potential negotiation outcomes. If that was not the case, many of these grant calculations would show a decrease year over year. So it's important to note that the ministry's already included a provision in our grants for the 23-24 year for the ongoing negotiations that are taking place. What the end result of those negotiations will be has not been decided. And if there's a requirement to fund more, that will come from the ministry. Less we don't expect, but if there's more, we'll see. I would like to draw your attention to some specific grants on this page. First one being student transportation. The ministry has finally reviewed and revised the transportation grant model. They've talked about this for years, but it has finally happened. Working with this new model, however, will be a transition as boards attempt to work within the model and report back to the ministry on the concerns that we come across. As with any review that takes place on a grant, the end result is usually a redistribution of existing funds to school boards. Some win, some lose. The sense we get across the province at this point is that most boards have actually lost than won when it comes to the review of the student transportation grant. That is the same case for Dufferin Peel. However, if you look at the chart, it appears to show an increase in funding. What is not as evident is that a portion of that funding is actually a flow through to our bus operators, which would address increases for bus driver wages, the driver retention program, and fuel escalation. So once that is taken care of, we are actually seeing a decrease in our student transportation funding. The next grant I draw your attention to is Indigenous education funding. This is actually a fairly good news story for Dufferin Peel. This is another grant that the ministry changed, and it's related to better supporting Indigenous education priorities. Dufferin Peel will receive 2.9 million, which is a significant increase over our current year. But also with this change comes an enveloping. So the grants in the Indigenous education area will be enveloped, which means it can only be spent on Indigenous education priorities and needs. And if it's underspent, that money goes into reserve to be carried forward and spent on those needs in the next year. A significant loss in 2023-24, and this is across the province, is the COVID learning and recovery funding. This was temporary funding in 22-23, this current year, and it amounted to 10.4 million for Dufferin PL and supported over 100 staff positions. Given that there is no other funding source from the ministry, there is no option except to reduce these positions. The impact is across many employee groups, including teachers, education resource workers, secretarial staff, custodians, and mid-management central staff positions. The information has been communicated with the impacted unions and associations, so they are well aware that this has happened. Another good news piece that is tied to a similar funding for staff positions is the supports for student funds. This funding is actually the result of central contract negotiations. The SSF was negotiated the last round of bargaining, so that last round ended in August of 2022. There was temporary funding in this current year to keep the staff that are supported by the SSF funds. And it has been included for 2023-24, of course, subject to ongoing central negotiations. There is a successfully negotiated contract with CUPE, and that funding has been provided. The funding levels are similar to the prior round, but due to increases in average salaries and benefit costs in Dufferin PL, there had to be a recalculation take place to know how many positions that funding would cover. And there's been some decreases in the number of funded positions as a result of that recalculation. Those two together, losing the COVID money and the change in SSF funds, is tied to what is a major process taking place right now in our board and across the province, and that is staffing. Significant work takes place right now with our HR departments, ER departments, with staffing in our school system. And the impact of losing that COVID money and the small change in the SSF and ongoing enrollment decline has led to staff position reductions taking place. Our unions and associations have been informed, as expected, not pleased, but we continue to meet and work through questions and concerns raised in that regard. Superintendent Brian Hester is with me this evening. Should there be any questions on any of these grant details, we'd be happy to address them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? As of now on my speakers list, I have Trustee Bruto Iannica, I have Trustee Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just with regards, am I missing maybe? Am I missing something? The SSF is 256 more than it was last year, more next year. Did I mishear that you said because of that and because of COVID, it has an impact on staff?
So through the chair, there is an increase in the total funding for SSF, but we have to consider that there's a provision for salary increases from the ministry built into that funding. However, the average salary and benefit costs for Dufferin PL have increased even more. So we have to make sure we align our costs to the funding provided, which means just a fewer number of positions can be funded.
And through you, Mr. Chairman, and regarding the COVID learning recovery of 10.4 million, I'm assuming, I'm hoping that when the conversation did take place with our partners, or unions, that we were very clear on why this was happening. It wasn't a decision that Dufferin Peel arbitrarily made just because. But we were very intricate in how, what, when, where, and specifically why. But I know the answer. I got to ask the question that what their and what their response was, unless it's confidential, and I get that.
So through the chair, very clear communication. And I know Superintendent Hester was involved in some of those meetings, so he may want to comment about response.
So through the chair, as Executive Superintendent Chairpack has outlined, we're very clear in the unfortunate outcome of losing that significant amount of money and unfortunately not being able to support the good positions that were carried forward for those couple of years with that funding. To be honest, the unions weren't, I don't feel like they were surprised compared to past, changes in grants, because I think it was well communicated either from the province or through their own bargaining units that funding was very clearly not continuing. And because the COVID programs are kind of coming to a close, that the positions supported by that funding also had to come to a close. So, but there were, respectful dialogue on both sides onto, the impact to both of our members on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could, how many positions is that? Did I hear 100, or did I read 100, or both?
So through the chair, both. That 10.4 million was able to support just over 100 staff positions.
And that was across the board, including secretarial, teachers, everything that you mentioned, mid-management, management, the whole 9 yards.
Through the chair, yes.
Is the staff have an idea, not right this very minute, that they can put into issues and events on what that breakdown is? Just for our understanding, because a lot of people will say or think that it's 100% pure teachers, 100% pure admin staff, 100% pure whatever. But if we have some information, we have some information saying that it is whatever the numbers are. Is that something that staff has at their available that they can put into issues and events?
So yes, through the chair, we can actually include what the proposed plan was that was presented last year, and includes all the details of the positions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you again to staff.
Thank you very much, Trustee Bruno Inica. Next, I have Trustee Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can see there are big increase on indigenous education funding. So over more than $1.88 million. Is it, and this fund, can you use it for indigenous study tour for students, to part of their indigenous study education purpose? And we use that fund?
So through the chair, that's part of the change in the way the grant was funded. So this was a bit of a surprise to boards this year, where they've changed how the model funds the boards. So previously it was focused on the number of, for us anyway, Dufferin Peel, the number of secondary credits that were taken. So courses beginning with N, those are all supported and generated grant funds under the Indigenous Education Grant. The ministry has now broadened out the whole funding model to really step back to say it really should support the overall board action plan on Indigenous education, which is very, very broad now. And they're directly funding that based on more of an average daily enrollment, kind of an ADE per pupil amount, with a very small component now supporting secondary classes where typically you'd have to run it, all of our secondary courses at an average class size of 23 across the board. That's our class size compliance model. For Indigenous courses, if they're between 8 or 23, they want you to use some of the funds to really make sure you run those courses at much smaller average enrollment amounts. So they're still recognizing that small funding component, but that's a very small piece now of the overall funding model. So really, it's now coming down to basically an amount the ministry says per pupils, here's your total amount, and that has significantly increased our board's amount. As Executive Superintendent Chair Baca noted, when they do a funding model adjustment, there are boards that will win and some that will, for a better term, lose. There are a number of boards that are on the losing side, but we are very fortunate in this case to be on the gaining side. So we are working closely with Superintendent Beccarino and his team to determine what can be spent within this new grant, recognizing that it's come out again very, very late in the year. So we're putting plans in place the best we can, but those plans will evolve during 23-24 and into future years. And just one other further note, there is ongoing consultation through the ministry as well. They're looking for feedback from boards on the changes to the model and to what supports boards might put in place to utilize the funding.
Thank you. The reason I asked this question, we are not only me, director and one of the trustees witnessed one of the school board took 22 students for the trip. They spent almost per students over $3,000. A trip. Use indigenous fund. That's the reason I asked this question this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Thomas. Do we have any other questions? Seeing no other questions, thank you very much for that presentation. We move on to the next item, which is actually item H, Trustee Committee's Administration Reports Requiring Action. H1, the proposed 2023-2024 capital budget. Executive Superintendent Julie Chierbaca.
Yes, thank you. Again, as part of a phased approach to presenting budget information, we are actually coming forward with a proposed 2023-2024 capital budget this evening. This addresses only capital funds. Again, has nothing to do with the operational budget presentation that will come forward later this month. So to present the report, Superintendent Hester will walk you through it.
Thank you. Thank you, Executive Superintendent Chierbaca. Good evening again, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to present the 23-24 proposed capital budget for consideration. This is included as H1 on page 84 of the agenda package. The Ministry of Education released the grants for student needs or GSNs on April 17th in the 2023 B7 memo. There were specifics tied to the capital grants. Within the details were the capital funding for the upcoming fiscal year. They did outline a minor change to the accountability framework. So additional accountability measures are being put on all boards, and it's designed to ensure school boards spend all of their school condition improvement and school renewal allocations within a 2.5-year time frame. So the ministry is hearing that or seeing through financial results that school boards were not spending the amounts in their minds in a timely manner. So they're putting that additional condition on the spending and reporting framework that boards must adhere to. When we turn our minds to the amounts we're showing, overall, our capital funding and expected expenditures are stable year over year, especially with those two funding sources I just outlined, the school condition improvement and school renewal funding allocations. These are the two primary funding sources that we use to maintain our schools and keep them in a good state of repair. At a previous ANF meeting, there was the presentation on the long-term facilities master plan. And that does indicate that our facilities require an estimated $350 million in work. And again, that's far in excess of the annual funding that we're reflecting this evening. On page 86 of the package, there is a chart that outlines the proposed capital funding sources and expenditures with comparisons to our current in-year financial reporting period 22-23 year. I'll just highlight a few notable changes looking at our projections for next year compared to what we're seeing for this year. School condition improvement looks like an increase, but what we're presenting there in that 22-23 figures there was 23 million from the current year, and we're projecting to see an increase to 34 million. The ministry's funding has remained very stable for our board, but we did have some carryover from last year that in working with Superintendent Matthew Thomas's team, we forecast what the expenses will be in the current year and into next year. So we're making sure that we're forecasting any carryover funds as part of the plan into next year, as part of those capital expenditures. Capital priorities also has a significant increase, but this relates to the commencement of the work on the Mount Pleasant #2 Catholic Elementary School and the replacement of the St. Anne Catholic Elementary School. And obviously, these are our projections, but as we focus down into how the spend is going in year, we will bring a revised set of estimates at a revised estimates presentation in the fall, typically, and that is in December, when we gather our forecasts for the year and reproject our expenditures and grants. So at this point, or also at that point, we would also bring forward any carryover amounts once we've completed our financial reporting cycle up to August 31st, 2023. The total estimated balanced capital budget presented before you is $68.6 million. At this point, Mr. Chair, I'd be pleased to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Brian Hester. Do we have any questions? Trustee Bruno Iannica?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Which one of these is would be allocated for the removal of porta packs, or is that a separate fund for the removal of porta packs? Because I know that there are, I mean, it's not a secret. I always talk about Mary Fix, but it's not just Mary Fix that would need to be removed. And I understand, and you know, I hear my colleagues talk about their needs as well. But with that, what appears to be an increase, like where would that money, or would that money still now be required to be approved by the province?
Yes, so through the chair, Trustee Iannica, you are correct. The funding source was a special request to the ministry for use of existing proceeds of disposition we had on hand. And we received enough to address a few sites that have been outlined previously. We're still waiting for the ministry's further guidance on the request to use additional proceeds of disposition for the two field restorations, the joint projects with the city of Brampton and the city of Mississauga. And once we have that and any indication on our current financial situation tied to LTD, that's when we can have dialogue with the ministry on if it would be any appetite to put another request in for use of proceeds of disposition for future support to demo any of their RCMs, the relocatable classroom modules or porta packs.
I could follow up, Mr. Chairman. So the numbers that I see before me really don't have anything to do with any trustee's request because of, I won't say health and safety because they shut the porta pack down, although people still, well, not people, but animals still get in there. But these numbers really have nothing to do with that request of all trustees, not just a specific trustee, correct?
Through the chair, that is correct. We're very aware through Superintendent Thomas of the needs, and we have kind of that plan ready to go, but we have to wait for the ministry's next steps on the existing requests for the use of proceeds of disposition to see then if and when we can make that next request to the ministry and see if that would then be approved. I think the good news is we've already kind of laid that plan out with them to say, you know, we need those funds and we need that approval, but we have to wait kind of one step at a time to see how they're going to address our current financial situation.
And if I could, Mr. Chairman, the school condition improvement, those funds are literally just for school. They're not for fields.
Through the chair, I can try and address that question. So school condition improvement is school renewal funding grant that addresses major building components, major building systems. So generally, it has to be an item that's of a capital depreciable nature, generally larger dollar items, mostly things like boilers and HVAC systems, plumbing, mechanical, electrical type systems. So your larger dollar items are generally covered by school condition improvement.
I'm glad to see, Mr. Chairman, that the number has gone up, even though I know that staff has repeatedly said that over the next 5 years, our needs will be about $350 million, $34 million, which is more than the 23, but it helps all of our schools, not just a specific schools. So thank you for the report. Greatly appreciate it. I was hoping that Portapac would be part of that, but hey, wishful thinking. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Trustee Bruno Yanika. On the speakers list, I have Trustee Bria Corbett and Trustee Luz Del Rosario. Trustee Bria Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you. So I see a high-level summary on page 86 that's been provided, but noting that the SCI program and the SR funding is intended for high and urgent needs to keep schools in state of good repair. Could staff please provide trustees maybe in issues and events a list of the specific schools and that are impacted with that funding and the usage of the funds and how much funds are being allocated for that? I would appreciate some more detailed information when staff have it, and I'm sure my colleagues as well.
Through the chair, yes, we can certainly put that information together for trustees. In fact, we are very close to finalizing the 2023 project list that we were going to be sharing with trustees. So should be in the coming days.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Trustee Bria Corbett. Next, I have Trustee Luz Del Rosario.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I just go back a little bit to the question that Trustee Bruno Yanika raised? Because somehow the response from Superintendent Thomas was getting faded, so I couldn't hear. So the schools, just like one of my schools, just like Trustee Yanika's school and probably the others, there's Portapac that's being removed. Are they going to be removed? I know I have been asking, especially one of them really smells so bad that soon as you enter the school, it just attacked you with that very bad smell. So is that still going on, happening in the summer or what?
Through the chair, in response to your question, Trustee Del Rosario, the schools which have already been approved for the use of proceeds of disposition by the Ministry of Education towards the removal of porta-packs or relocatable classroom modules, that work will continue. That work will take place, I should say, this summer. So there were 3 schools that were identified to the Ministry of Education last year, and those 3 schools were approved for the use of proceeds of disposition, as Superintendent Hester already noted, and those projects will go forward this year. And I believe that one of those schools at least is in your ward.
OLG, yeah, OLGB, yeah. Is that one of the ones that's there? Is it OLGB or St. John 23rd?
Through the chair, yes, that is one of the schools, the ones you just identified.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you, Superintendent Thomas. Mr. Chair, I have one question still. Based on the report that we see on page 86, proceeds for distribution is blank. I was just wondering, wasn't there, or was I dreaming it? Wasn't there a time that we were talking about disposing one of the closed schools? Is that still happening, or is it on hold that we're not disposing it?
Through the chair, I can start, and then perhaps Superintendent Hester can also add on. But generally speaking, the proceeds of disposition are a source of funds that we get whenever a site that is surplus to the needs of our board is actually sold. And those funds are kept in a separate account, proceeds of disposition. The use of proceeds of disposition, though, is subject to regulation that's governed by the Ministry of Education. And
Right.
as Superintendent Hester's already noted, there are specific instances where we have to receive a minister's exemption because the typical use of proceeds of disposition is to address school renewal. That is governed by the school condition improvement allocation parameters. So it's very specific to that type of expense. Anything above and beyond that is where we have to get special exemption from the Ministry of Education, which is what we had to do in the case I was highlighting earlier for Trustee Ianika and for you, Trustee Del Rosario. So the reason that there is no amount that's noted per se is because we are, as Trustee Hester noted, we're in the process of trying to finalize the plan that we want to put forward. And that's also subject to receiving more information from the Ministry of Education and with respect to the requests we've already made. We still haven't received a response to the earlier request that we made in regard to those two sports fields, one in Brampton, one in Mississauga, that involve our schools in those locations. And so once we have more information and we receive further information, once we receive more information on that request and more information from the ministry more generally with respect to our financial situation, as Superintendent Hester noted earlier, we would be in a better position to be able to provide information to trustees about whether proceeds of disposition might be part of the picture for the coming school year.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you, Superintendent Thomas.
Mr.
Thank
Chair,
you.
just to add on that, if I may.
Okay,
We also left those two lines there intentionally with the two blanks because we just wanted to kind of keep that in mind that there are kind of ongoing projects, but they fell kind of in between the reporting cycles that are listed there. So the other line, for example, that's blank is education development charges. Sometimes there's expenses there if there's land requirements that we may purchase here and there. So it kind of just gives the Board of Trustees some reminders on the various different capital sources that may or may not kind of pop into these different cycles, but they're currently reflected as zero. But as you've noted, Trustee Del Rosario, there is active work ongoing, and we're anticipating hopefully some good news into the future if we get approvals for the request we've made from the province right now.
okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Superintendent, is Superintendent Hester or General Manager Hester?
Superintendent,
Chair.
thank you.
Thank you very
Can't
much.
remember.
Any other questions, Trustee Del Rosario? No? Okay. Do we
No,
have
thank you, Mr. Chair.
No problem. Any other questions from anyone else? Seeing no questions. Perfect. Thank you very much for that presentation. We have no notices of motion this evening.
Through the chair, there's a.
Oh, there is a motion at the end of this. 1 second, let me
Page
just pull that
85.
up. Could I get a mover that the Administration and Finance Committee recommend that the Board of Trustees approve the proposed balance 2023-2024 total capital budget of 68.6 million? Could I get a mover, please?
So
Moved by
moved,
Trustee
Mr.
Bruno
Chair.
Ianika. Any opposed? I mean, sorry, all in favor, please put your hands up. To the trustees that don't have their cameras on, if you could put your hand up, just let me know. Perfect.
Mary and Della.
Any opposed? Seeing no opposed? Sorry, Daryl, are you, so if
I'm
you're
in favor,
can I-
my hand came up. I mean, you can see my hand a little late.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So that was in favor. Seeing none opposed, this motion has been passed. Thank you very much. Next, we move on to our, we have no notices of motion this evening, no additional business. We move on to item K, which is questions asked of and by board members. Do we have any questions this evening? Trustee Bruno Ianika?
Mr. Chairman, I have a request if possible. One of the requests that I have is that if a letter goes out from the school of any trustee that the school of any trustee that is represented, can the trustee or trustees names be added as a CC? For example, if I have a school of this board that I represent, which has to close down for whatever particular reason, then in the letter going home or in the is CC'd Bruna Yanika. In the sense that if a principal or a new principal is being, a letter is going out from the current principal, then current trustees or trustee is also included. It's important for me, and I know in some of my colleagues, and I could specify a couple, but because parents will say, not very many, and I won't say that it's a boatload. I would say a couple have said, "Did you know about this?" I went, "Yeah, I knew. I'm very well aware of this." Specifically in this one particular school because we had to close the school. So if staff could advise our principals and our superintendents, or our superintendents to the principals, or when staff have a meeting with that be part of the letter going out.
So through the chair, yes, we can do both the director's webcast as well as a communication through general manager at Campbell's office.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Trustee Anika. Next, I have Trustee Stefano Pascucci.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chairman, and sorry for looking down on my cell phone here because my email is not working properly, and so is my computer. So I'm just going off my cell phone right now. Just want to thank staff for providing the information and issues and events regarding the parking spaces at our secondary schools. The information provided is great. There are a lot of one or two places. For example, I'll use one school has one administration, 14 undesignated spots, first come, first serve. But then, you have the school that we discussed offline, 22 spots all reserved, with no visitor spots for anybody for the school. While other ones have 2 or 3 for the school. Some have spots for police, some don't have any reserved spots for staff, only visitor spots. Can we look at somehow requiring a certain amount of visitor spots to be available? Because the issue with the school that we discussed online is the fact that if you have somebody who does not qualify to have a handicap permit, they're required to walk quite far to the library, which we share with the city. Being good neighbors, we should be able to provide something to them as well. Is it possible for us to have something put in place that there is a requirement to have a visitor spot?
So through the chair, similar to yourself, it's been brought to light that there is a discrepancy from school to school to school, and some of it is historic and it's just happened. So I think our next steps, once we've finalized the survey, is to formalize a process by which a secondary school of a certain size should have X amount of parking spots and who should be available and have access to those parking spots. So we're looking internally to put together a bit of a master plan that we can roll out to the system, so there's consistency from school to school to school to school.
Thank you. And one thing I failed to, well, I was actually going to send you a picture of it, Associate Director. This particular school has 4 spots for admin and then multiple spots for secretary. And I think spot number 10 is for the chaplain. That's concerning as well on my side. So if we are going to standardize, then we should look at who qualifies, who doesn't qualify. Obviously, we have to have the amount of spots required by the various acts and other policies put in place by municipalities and provinces on how many accessible spots we have to have. But if we can provide, if we can create a framework, because after all, we are good neighbors, and we try to be good neighbors, and we should be good neighbors to the public. So I appreciate any updates you can provide in issues and events. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Trustee Stefano Pascucci. Next, I have Trustee Mario Pascucci, and I have
Yeah.
Trustee Daryl D'Souza after. Trustee-
Just
First of all,
to this
say-
point, though,
Sorry. Oh, it's to this point, Trustee Daryl D'Souza?
yes,
Trustee Mario Pascucci, is it to
Chairman.
this point as well?
Yes, but let him go first, please. Thank you.
Are you sure?
Yes, no problem. We'll go
Okay.
ahead.
Trustee Daryl D'Souza?
I follow. what's-
to this point, some of my secondary schools have a parking spot for, I guess, the special resource officer, which is for the police. Now, the fact that these police do not come into our schools anymore, is it necessary that we continue to keep that spot marked for them? Through you, Mr. Chair.
So through the chair, I think we need to review all the spots and find out what works best. Because, when you have a reserved spot, it doesn't have to be reserved for one particular person. It can be open for any number of people. So what we found through the survey is that the schools are all over the map on the number of reserved spots, who they reserve them for, where those reserved spots are located. And I think it's our opportunity, as Trustee Stefano Pascucci mentioned, to standardize it right across. But included in the summary we have identifies it as what the spots are. So we'll be looking at standardizing it and then rolling that out to all secondary schools.
Would that require a policy change or motion coming?
So I don't believe it does. I think what we can do is we can share our findings and find out what works well at schools. You have a number of admitted schools that's changed over time. So maybe at one time there were 4 admitted a school. Now there's 3 admitted a school. It's evolved over time. It's evolved over time. And I think a number of these are just legacy spots that new admin have inherited from previous admin. And now that we try to standardize a lot centrally, that's what we're going to do with this as well.
Right, but standardizing, again, if it's not through policy, then it becomes it's a standard, but we probably follow our own standard because standards are quite open-ended, right? So if it becomes a policy and it goes into our general administrative procedures, then it has to be followed. And then it's
You're
not
absolutely right. And if you allow us to come up with a standardization, I do believe we have, whether it's a construction policy or a school site policy, that we can attach a gap to that identifies the number and the location of parking spots.
Right. Thank you, Associate Director. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Trustee Mario Pascucci.
Yeah, to this point, if I may, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Daniel, the requirements from the fire side or from that position, from that perspective, city bylaws, what have you, you have all that information, obviously. So that information will take in consideration what's requested by the number of spots, what's requested by the city or region or whatever. Not specifically where they are, but how many we need for those outside sort resources. Am I correct?
Yes, through the chair. Through site plan approval, there's a number of spots per classroom for an elementary school and a high school. So we have to adhere to the number of spots. We also have to ensure that the lanes are open so that there's fire access for fire trucks all the way around the building. So all of that's taken into account. As I mentioned, I think this has evolved over time to get to where we are today. And we just have to peel that back now and to Trustee D'Souza's point, formalize it so that we don't get to this stage again.
Well, I mean, you give an inch, you take an inch, right? And eventually you got a whole parking spot there. And there should be a limited amount. We have to service our customer, our students, parents who drop off, et cetera. Are we hindering, in fact, any buses or things of that nature. Those are the concerns I have as well as like, for example, any requirement for fire, what have you. But I'm glad we're going to do that. When do you see this happening? I'm sorry, I was offline there for a while. I couldn't go anywhere with it. And I had to come back in. When do you expect this report to come? You may have answered this question. I do apologize.
No, through the chair, I haven't answered that question yet. We haven't discussed it as a team, but it's something I don't think would take a lot of time. It would be something that we could bring back in the fall. We'll look at one of the fall policy meetings. We'll work with Superintendent Vecchierino to have it addressed then.
We also have through you, Mr. Chairman, last question. Can we have through you decals, stickers, or whatever, given to the individuals, not necessarily a spot number, but in fact, they're authorized to park at Dufferin Peel. I don't want to have a situation where we have people coming with different cars every other day or something like that, 2 or 3 cars, and you don't know which ones they own and which one's which. So at least they'll have one decal or whatever, and it stays with the vehicle, and that's it. If it's there, great. If it's not, you don't park.
Through the chair, my experience with decals or any sticker, especially if you have to deploy it centrally, they don't work very effectively because people move sites, people move locations, people move from board to board, people leave the school, and then you end up having to change them every year, and it becomes a very costly endeavor and very, very, very difficult to manage.
In that case, I'll leave it with you.
That's something to think about.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Trustee Bria Corbett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few questions. The first one is regarding the boulevard sign for St. Aloysius Gonzaga Catholic Secondary School. I share the school with Chair Del Rosario and Trustee Valoria, but it's been brought to our attention that the sign hasn't worked for a number of years, and the replacement cost is quite significant. The other concern is that it's a shared responsibility with the city, and perhaps in that agreement, that may have details too on who's responsible for repairing and replacing it. And it may even be on city property. And then there's electrical involved. So it is a bit of a complex situation, but I was just wondering if staff could have an opportunity to connect with the principal and loop back with the area trustees on a plan, because to have a very large sign that has been inoperable for a number of years, I just don't think is serving the purpose that it's intended to.
Through the chair, if you would allow us to take that away and do the necessary research, we'd be happy to report back.
Much appreciated. Mr. Chairman, I have 2 more questions.
Sure.
So just in follow-up to that question, for the upcoming school year, would staff be able to provide a list of the schools that will be on the docket for getting the updated boulevard signs, and perhaps a list that's retroactive for the ones that have already been done?
Through the chair, we will provide that update. As I indicated in a response to an earlier report, we are just in the process of finalizing that information about our entire facility project list for the coming school year, or sorry, for the coming summer and into the fall as well. And we will highlight the boulevard signs that we are intending to install.
Amazing, thank you. And one last question, just regarding the inclusion of the word Catholic in the names of all of our schools, has that been communicated to our schools, or direction provided to the schools to include the name Catholic in their communications, school newsletters? I understand the websites are still a work in progress, but if that could.
Through the chair, the communication has gone out to all schools through General Manager Campbell's office.
Excellent. So through the chair, perhaps they need another reminder. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Corbett. Do we have any other questions? Seeing no questions, we move on to, we have no items for our declared interest items. We're moving on to our in-camera session. Could I get a mover to move into in-camera? Moved by Trustee Thomas. Any opposed, or all in favor? Could you please put your hands up? Thank you very much. Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. We're going to be moving into in-camera, taking a 10-minute break. We'll be back at 9:25.
Okay, welcome back. Okay, welcome back to the Administration and Finance Committee meeting for June 6th. Trustees approved the minutes of the in-camera session for May 2nd, 2023, and we received a verbal report regarding a personnel matter. Can I please have a motion for the rise from in-camera? Thank you, Trustee Ianika. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. Motion to adjourn tonight's meeting at 10:10. Moved by. Thank you, Thomas. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. Once again, thank you to our members of the public for joining us this evening. We always appreciate your attendance. Our next Administration and Finance Committee meeting is scheduled for September 12th, 2023. God bless you.